Hello, and welcome to Bad Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Larsen, and I'm here to make you feel like a great teacher. You're not a bad teacher. We all have crazy student stories, parent stories, and I swear every time I tell one of those stories to someone, they look at me like I'm insane. That's not real life. Excuse me, this is real life in the education world. And I wanted to do a solo episode today to kind of share with you why I left teaching. So I was in the same district, same school, 7 years. I was a teacher, and then I moved to instructional coach and my last year, and it wasn't a light or easy decision to leave. It was something that I was sad to leave. I had thought about for a long time, and finally I just reached a point where I couldn't take on everything at once again. So I stopped teaching, and yeah, teaching was all I've known for so long. Growing up, all I wanted to be was a teacher. I remember playing school as a kid with my twin sister, and I would make her do homework sheets, and I was always the teacher, and I never let her be the teacher. So leaving teaching was not an easy decision. And so I just kind of wanted to do a solo episode and share just the last year that I spent at the school that I was at. Like 1 year of the trauma that I was taking on. And I know that I'm not the only one. There are teachers everywhere that maybe my school year is a month for them, which is crazy. Also, if I feel like I'm breathing heavy. I am beyond pregnant and I feel like I can't breathe. So I am sorry if you hear that throughout the time I am talking, but yeah. So I spent 7 years at one school, and I was a teacher. When you're a teacher, you have the not burden, you take on the emotional trauma of 20 to 30 students each year. You kind of take on their baggage, take on their trauma, and you handle that. Like I could easily take on the 30 kids I had a year, take in their trauma. I mean, there were many days where I would come home crying because it was so much. Like I called social services all the time, like dealt with those kids, many things thrown at me, hit, kicked, bit, spit. I mean, you name it. I've had it done as a teacher when it comes to dealing with behavior kids or just kids that needed extra love and attention. It's like you take on that and then you kind of check it out at the door, come home, and yeah. So I would always tell my husband, I'm like, I have to go into my bubble. Like I have to leave work at work, come home, and I'm in my bubble. And my bubble was, that didn't exist. That didn't happen that day. And I would take on the burden. I would deal with it tomorrow. That was tomorrow's problem. So I'd come home, leave it all at the door, go into my safe space. Nothing bad happens in the world. I'm with my family. And that's how I would deal with it. And I did that for years. And my husband, like, there are so many stories that happened at work that my husband doesn't even know about because I was so drained by the time I got home. I was done talking. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. I didn't want to live it again. And then I think about that now, and those stories, those kids are living it every day. Like I've had students more than one student, like has witnessed a parent commit suicide in front of them. More than one student. I've had foster care students bouncing from house to house. I've had students that knew their parents were in jail and knew why their parents were in jail. Students that were abused, physically, sexually, mentally, you name it. I've had every student like that. And I've taken on that trauma. So I moved to instructional coach my last year. And I was super excited because instructional coach, you're supposed to help new teachers learn to teach, learn to find their style, kind of help them with their behavior kids, which is one of my favorite things doing. So I was super excited about that. And what I realized was that my job entailed so much more. I am grateful that I had admin that let me be a part of a lot of instructional decisions, and admin that let me feel so involved in the school-wide culture and let me make decisions across the board in general. But with that being said, and us being understaffed and I mean, you name it. We know in every school it's understaffed, underfunded, everything. I was not doing what thought I would be doing as an instructional coach. I rarely got into classrooms to help teachers, and so I felt like I was failing at that part as my part of my job. But I was constantly helping my admin put out fires that were constantly happening throughout the school. I mean, fights, um, helping kids with their trauma. So, like, I went from dealing with my classroom trauma, like those 30 kids, to 500 kids, trying to figure out, oh, which kids should we get a psychologist or a counselor 2 days a week? Which kids are we going to let in? We can only let 5 in. We're going to let this kid who was sexually assaulted, or are we going to let this kid who was physically beat? Like, we can only pick one. It takes a toll. Like, when you're making those decisions, you're playing Russian roulette with children's lives. And it was so much to take on a daily basis. I was coming home, checking out at the door, coming home, and then I felt just emotionally drained and unavailable for my kids. Like, I was short fused. Same with my husband. Like, I couldn't take on any more emotional thinking for a day. And I know I'm not the only teacher that felt like this. I know that there are teachers everywhere who are feeling like this on a daily basis. And it is hard. Let me just paint a picture. Just this past school year, we had a man wander onto our campus and try and kidnap a child, and a teacher pulled a gun out. We had 2 very serious school shooter threats. We had so many fights. Gosh, so many fights. We had a fight where some kids jumped a 10-year-old girl, filmed it, and it went viral on, not viral, but it was online and being thrown around between everyone, and it was heartbreaking to watch, and kids just spreading it like a virus. I had a former student who was in 8th grade now commit suicide this past year. That was the first funeral that I went to where one of my students, and that's a whole different experience. Yeah. Anyways, I had a former student that was in 7th grade at the time commit sexual assault to another student. And I had these students when they were in 3rd grade. So seeing that and having, it's just a lot to take in, knowing that these kids that you're trying to help beat the system, you're giving your heart and soul, loving them so much. You want them to beat the cycle that they're in, and then they fall into it. And at such a young age, both of those kids, it is heartbreaking to witness, just to see your students that you have so much hope for. You want them to do better, and when they leave you, they're in somebody else's hands, and you can't make parents be good parents. I can't do that. And then you just watch them fall through the cycle, and just another kid lost in the education system. Just another one lost in the education system. And it is so emotionally draining and, again, heartbreaking to see that happen. I had to call social services just in that year as an instructional coach, more than I've ever had to call in the 7 years of teaching, because so many kids would open up. I would eat lunch with kids. I would be in different classrooms, so I had more kids opening up to me. I had a young child tell me that at night his mom would duct tape his hands and his feet and over his mouth because he was too hyper at night, and so he would have to sleep like that in a closet. We had a mom come in, drop off her son, and say, "I'm not coming back for him. I don't want to be his mother anymore. I don't want him anymore. Call whoever you need to call. I'm not coming back for him." And so getting to that point too, like, so many kids in sixth, fifth grade, thinking about the thought of suicide is how? Why? Like, they're so young, they have so much hope, so much potential in their life, and then I'm trying to help them not have suicidal thoughts at such a young age, and trying to convince them that it does get better when I've seen firsthand those kids fall through the cracks. And it is, I keep saying it, heartbreaking. Like, I think about those kids daily still. Like, I can't, there are nights where I don't sleep because I'm just wondering, what happened to that kid? What happened to that kid? And yeah, so you go home, and then what are you supposed to do? Come home, live life like normal, and that's it. And then you go back to school and try and get them help. You fight to try and get them help. And there's not enough resources. There's a million hoops you have to jump through. And you have parents that don't want to help. I'm not saying it's all parents' faults. It's a society thing. Like, everyone, there's some lack of funding. And you have teachers leaving the field left and right because this is a lot to take on in your job description. So you have all of this weight of their trauma, and then on top of that, you're teaching. You have to go in and teach like everything is fine, every subject, prove your data. Then we have standardized testing on top of all of that. And it was a lot. It was a lot to see as a whole how the system works. Like, in my classroom, again, it was kind of a bubble for me, the classroom, and helping those kids, and then sending them off to the next teacher and assuming that that teacher is going to care and love for them the way that I did, or that their parents are going to care and love for them the way that I did. And you hope that things are going to get better, and then you find out in the future your students are falling, they're failing, they're falling through the cracks, and no one is there to help them. And then on top of that, last year I found out I was pregnant, and 3 months in I had a miscarriage. And so coming back to work, putting on my happy face, and trying to care emotionally for those kids and take care of myself emotionally and my kids and my family, it was just a lot. It was too much. And I'm grateful and lucky that I'm in the position I can be in, where I was able to walk away at a time that I did, because I don't think that I would be emotionally, for my mental health, okay giving. I wouldn't have felt right not giving 110% to those kids that need me to be giving 110%, and my kids at home when I didn't feel okay myself. And I know I'm not the only teacher out there. I know I'm not the only person who is taking on the trauma of all of these kids and hoping that the system works for them. And we're all starting to realize that the system is not working. So now what? So now what do we do? It's a whole other question for another day, but I don't know what the answer is. I know that there is a shift where I feel like people are starting to publicly hear teachers a little more, but I think it's also creating this rift where we're hearing teachers more, but it's also creating a divide where some people are blaming teachers more as well for everything that's happening. It's now a line that has been drawn of fighting between, it's the teacher's fault these kids aren't doing this, or it's the teacher's fault these kids are falling through the cracks, it's the teacher's fault kids are acting up more, it's the teacher's fault that kids are bringing weapons to school. And then you have teachers we've been fighting for years saying we need mental health resources, more resources in general, and help for these kids that are screaming so loudly for help. and nobody wants to see it or hear it. So yeah, that's my, I guess, not rant, but my big why I left. I still see myself as a teacher. I want to go back into teaching. I know that there will be a time and a place, and I want to continue fighting the good fight to help the education system become better for not only teachers but these kids that are relying so heavily on us, on teachers, to provide for them, because kids are at home. That's their number one, like their go-to. And if they're not getting it at home, who do they turn to next? Who does society turn to next to help solve these kids' problems? Teachers, the school, because that's where they spend most of their day. And so, and I know teachers are pouring their hearts and souls into trying to make it better for them and trying to help these kids. So yeah, if you've got a story, or if you want to share your why on why you left or why you're thinking about leaving, just know you are not alone. So many teachers are leaving now, and so many teachers are realizing the trauma and carrying this. It's not good for our mental health. But follow me on all the socials. Send me a DM, a message, email, sharing your story. I'd love to connect with you.